Apologies for the delay in getting started today, but we're ready to go now, and I am joined by Jonathon Wright of Hitachi Consulting, and he is going to be presenting Testing as a Service Model. And if you have any questions about this presentation that Jonathan's about to do, you can type your questions into the discussion forum that we've created for you over on Test Huddle. And I've just shared the link with you there in the chat box on your control panel. And directly after the webinar, we'll be heading across there. So now I'm going to hand you over to Jonathon. Hello, Jonathon.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Just give it a couple of seconds as it loads up the slides.
Yeah, we can see your slides there now. We're good to go.
Excellent. Fantastic. All right, well, so hopefully this will be a rememberable 5th of November. There's a lot of content to be covered today, so I will be making this available on the Test Huddle site. I think there is already a discussion post with the links to the slide decks. And I think there's a number of people who've also shared them on Twitter, so thanks for that. So usually I try to avoid giving too much of a background, but I recently joined Hitachi, and I realized that when you grow to a company of a certain size, you have different types of tasks and challenges, really. And what I've been experiencing whilst at Hitachi was we're starting to look at some interesting new testing challenges. So things like smart cities, which I'll be talking about today, and things like nuclear power, Internet of Things, you know, a lot of the items that you may have seen already on Gartner. And also, you know, we're all familiar with things like railway solutions, bullet trains, and the new HS2. So all interesting testing challenges, but what my main question for this entire session really was to look at, you know, are the traditional models that we use for testing still as relevant when we're talking about dealing with complex smart cities or ecosystems in the cloud. So I wanted to give it a bit of context, and strangely enough, Hitachi are actually doing a smart city at the moment in Copenhagen, which EuroSTAR has been there in the past, and hopefully they'll still be there in the future. And one of our remits was to really look at making it carbon neutral by 2025. So you know, this is a lot of different initiatives, all interconnected, all requiring a certain amount of testing. And I think, you know, there's definitely going to be some interesting challenges around there. So, you know, the question comes out there, you know, does testing as a function, the traditional methodology, really still apply when we're talking about these hugely complex ecosystems? And, you know, now machine-to-machine communication means they're all connected and interconnected, and each one of them probably is tested up to the point, but are they tested from the entire system? So, you know, this is a good question. Internet of Things is definitely a new challenge. And obviously for people who kind of think, well, what is Internet of Things? Well, you know, I think this is a great example for Nest, you know, for the controlling your energy usage at home. But these are just one of many devices that I see kind of coming into both our home life and also into businesses. So let's just quickly have a look. So, you know, straight away, the old software development lifecycle model, which we're all very familiar to, you know, to me, the trick is in the name, really, in the fact that it talks about software. It doesn't really talk about hardware. Internet of Things is definitely hardware. One of the many functions which is in part of the delivery methodology. So, you know, I'm kind of questioning the core remit of what we're currently looking at and what we really need to be able to deal with these next generation with the testing challenges. So obviously one that's very simple, you know, something that's kind of emerging in the industry at the moment, especially around business intelligence, is obviously big data. And I joke a number of times with the whole small data, in the sense small data is a lot easier to test, but when you've got 4.3 petabytes of test data, which is what I had at my last role, you know, these big data testing solutions is actually really quite challenging. And also the example here for a engagement with Hitachi and NASA, the fact that the data growth is 50 gigabytes a day per day, and you've got to be able to emulate those kind of volumetrics for how the system's going to perform, and also, as that grows, that becomes an incredible challenge. So big data, obviously something new on there, and I'm kind of saying, well, actually, if we're looking at the whole software development lifecycle, maybe what we should be thinking about is maybe more of a solution delivery lifecycle that includes everything. It could include manufacturing to hardware to software, the whole lifecycle. So this is what we'll be talking a little bit about today, and I'm quite interested to see what people think about as far as the testing as a function versus testing as an activity. And I think you're all probably already aware of that, but silo testing functions that don't communicate and share resources, and also share upstream, downstream resourcing as far as the inputs and outputs that obviously, for instance, in the smart city might come into the smart grid. Part of it is by design, we're actually in teams that don't interconnect upstream and downstream to the whole solution landscape. So that's the first kind of question. And my initial discussion came from Paul Gerard's a new model for testing. And Paul was talking about modeling, the thought modeling that we go behind doing testing. And what I really liked about this white paper, and I would definitely recommend downloading the discussion paper, and I know Paul, is definitely from a community side of things, is really interested in, feedback and how we improve how we do testing, and also model testing and get better at it. But one of the things that you guys said is, models are not always adequate, they're not always correct. So there's definitely an opportunity on how we improve those models and how we model how we do testing activities. Now, I had a quick look through, and obviously model-based testing is one thing, but I've been looking at kind of model-based design. So that's kind of taking DDD, which is domain driven designs, and look at how potentially we could utilize this for getting better at creating business models that we can actually test. And I'm going to give you an example about clean water, which is one of those initiatives for Copenhagen, which is about how we predict pollution over time. Then we look at how we set up the infrastructure. We do analysis, simulation of that, and prediction for what it's going to look like in the future. And we can get better and better at this. So part of it is new challenges, new opportunities, and definitely a new model to go forwards with. So I followed on from Paul Gerard's original discussion paper around a new model for testing, and took this into a discussion paper of my own, which was talking around testing as a service model. So for those people who probably heard me speak last year's EuroSTAR, I've been talking about test automation as a service, but obviously test automation as a service is just one of the many components that could create this kind of consumable service that we can add value to our clients and everybody else. So what was the big driver behind this? Well, I suppose one of the big drivers, especially from a Gartner's point of view, is the digital enterprise. So, they're saying, there's a digital blueprint, businesses are becoming digital, and, we all know this, we all work in these collaborative portals, enterprise, agile, social enterprise. These are all things that we've started using, and the idea is that will drive businesses to actually start embracing some of these challenges, and that could lead from things like enterprise gamification to how they deal with the mobile side of things. All very interesting and challenging areas. But what we don't really talk about usually is the abstraction, the business abstraction layer. Typically, our test, when we do testing, it's specific to a particular implementation. So really what I wanted to do was look at a new model. I'm not going to go into this in much detail because that's what the discussion paper is there for, but I really wanted to understand how we get better at working with the business to understand from requirements being or the problem area right at the shift left to the eventual solution, which obviously consumes a certain amount of testing. So first I'm going to just quickly go through a very lightning through of business abstraction layer. Then we're going to look at really as a service. So this is stuff which we all know about, stuff as software as a service, etc., etc. infrastructure platform as a service, and then finally, we're going to look at the testing as a service layer, which is the most important thing, which I want to talk about today, and explore things like performance testing as a service, security testing as a service, test platform as a service. Some of these kind of new emerging service models that you can consume as a community or even as a company. So, one of the things that Paul kind of made very apparent on his model was that he was kind of saying, well, actually, I'm not too worried about how you end up doing this. So I don't care if it's you're in the context-driven camp versus, or you're in the automation or hardware or checking, whatever you want to call it. How we actually go and do the test automation, there's plenty of people who are much more informed to be able to tell you how we can potentially approach that. I'm just talking about the service layer, so what kind of services we could potentially use. And like I said, this is kind of a discussion paper. It's kind of a starting point to inspire people to really move forwards. So the last year I kind of started talking more around kind of superseding the application lifecycle management model, and the fact that now it's not a single application we're testing. So ALM might be a tool, but part of that will be a potential is a number of applications that make up a solution, and then for my previous engagement there was 2,700 applications, and obviously breaking those up into solutions wasn't enough. You had to go one level above, which was the whole portfolio, which was by business domain or by work stream, a logical representation, pulling that information up and down, and then finally I've kind of looked at it now as maybe that's superseded again by the whole business on a page, the whole business lifecycle management, which is working with the business to really change those different, those key value, agility, visibility, flexibility, really drive the business's agility to actually do what they're best at, not testing or being specialists in automation or specialists in security testing. They care about, being able to bring new products, new exciting products to market, or, provide services, etc., etc. So this requires us to start talking and interacting with the whole business in a new way. Now, obviously, from a business on a page point of view, which is the very, very high level encapsulation of all their business processes and all their business agility, down to the actual acceptance criteria that potentially is set against, say, for instance, a business level question. Will my overnight batch run on time, or will we be able to deal with, Black Friday? These high level questions that somehow we need to map from the discovery phase, where we've got to learn about how we prove that and what parts of the system we're going to have to touch, or if part of the business we're going to touch, and then we understand how we prove that, validate those models that we've created, extract the right level of knowledge, do the business intelligence stuff so that we can pull the right information to the right people at the right time to make these things happen. So let's forget the business abstraction layer. Now let's really focus as a service model, which we're all already familiar with. And then we'll go into the test abstraction layer, which we kind of said is just logistics. It could be exploratory, it could be, whatever it may be. It's, that's up to you guys. It's how you do it. We're not going to try and cover it. I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion around that anyway. So why as a service? Well, I've been talking about testing as a service since about 2011, and part of that was exploring these models where we can add value, and questioning whether or not we should be providing those services as a company or a business. Obviously, we've all used things like software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and I've added hardware as a service because I think that's quite important from the whole Internet of Things component. Now, obviously, this is a great example. Self-drive cars, again, something on the Gartner hype curve. If I was going to have to test this car driving around a track very fast, remotely, or actually in the car, I would be, I'd probably be more suited with software as a service, the whole dashboard system. But when it came to the whole platform and infrastructure, which is dealing with all the sensors and all the hardware that's doing thousands of calculations per second, I'm probably not the best person to do it. If you put me in the car, and incidentally, I thought the only way I can know anything about this is test it. So last week I decided to go around the Top Gear test track and see for myself how I could potentially do this and how many things it's going to have to concentrate on to be able to actually navigate me around a simple thing like a road or a track, which I'm sure we've all done on our daily commute into work. Maybe not at those speeds though. So the whole as a service model, when we look at that hardware, software as a service, part of working with those vendors, such as, let's use Salesforce as the great example, part of it is taking that business problem or challenge and looking at a solution which we can deliver. And there's obviously quality and assurance which we're putting around being able to deliver that solution. But what we've been talking about recently is the whole shift left. We want to get closer and closer to the problem definition. And part of that is going to the point where it's down to requirements, and then we all then look at the shift right approach. The whole going down to the end of the solution, DevOps, test ops. Even to the point where now I'm thinking, well, actually, solution decommission is the opportunity for you to reuse the test assets that you can pull in to check that the new solution actually does everything the old solution does. So the testing doesn't just stop once the product goes into production. And then going upwards, I'm calling it shift up now. I know that Neil will have something to say about this, but part of that is actually how do we get further up? How do we get to the point where we're actually giving the right information? I use the executive scorecard as an example, but to the CIO, CTO, so they can understand the value as what's being brought is they're going to get delivered as part of this model. And then obviously straight down, which is to the customer. Now, I think the customer's changed now. I think the customer actually is end users. In the old days, customer used to be the business, but the business probably sell this on. They may use systems, so they may have, the end users might be the business, but typically it's a service or a product which they're going to put out. So I bring in the whole social innovation, social intelligence, and that differs slightly from some of the other stuff I'm going to be talking about. But part of that is the whole shift left, right, up and down, which I'll be going through again for the testing as a service model. Hopefully that won't upset too many people that turns. So business delivery management, this is a slide from my 2011 deck. Part of it was the as a service model was working with the business on an idea and obviously trying to get to the point where there is a solution. And that will go through all the different as a service models, development as a service, release as a service, support as a service, and it's all about our communications between those two. And that's really where the Solution Delivery Lifecycle Integration kind of model is trying to be pushed through, in the sense that, let's not just stop ourselves at software, let's worry about everything else, but from an end-to-end point of view, and look at how we can add quality around that, and how we can work with those guys, and how the domain standards like the new ISO or whatever it may be help us communicate to other teams, or in the same team, to actually allow this to happen. So now we're getting onto the real kind of grit, is really the testing as a service stuff. So I'm going to quickly use the whole NFC stuff, mainly because I've got an iPhone 6 and I feel like I must use it, even though it's not been released to the UK, but the functionality is there now. And obviously I'm not lucky enough to have an Apple Watch or whatever it may be. But I found this really interesting, and you'll notice that all the links that I put in this document today are actually links that have happened in the last month. I've tried to keep them so that they're relevant information. It's not stuff that is 5 years out of date. And I typically do that whenever I'm doing a search on Google. It's limited to last week's amount of information, so that I don't get stuff what's too old. Part of last month there was a massive article in CNET around the fact that there is actually now more mobile devices on the planet than there is people. So I think that milestone is a huge milestone. It might have superseded the whole IPv6 kind of model problem, which never really became a problem. But now we've got so many devices. The fact that these devices are attached to a human interaction point, whereas Internet of Everything is actually, they're saying there's about 250 million machine-to-machine connections at the moment, but that's actually growing much faster, at a much faster rate than the adoption of mobile. So these are not only going to be talking to mobile devices, but from Internet of Things to Internet of Things. So this is suddenly becoming a very large ecosystem. And who's the best person to do this? Who's the best person to do the to test the platform and the infrastructure? To do the automated testing on mobile devices, or dealing with Internet of Things. Maybe we've got to start working with the teams. We might feel comfortable doing the functional testing stuff, but we might not be for performance testing at those kind of volumes, or the mobile testing, or the security testing. So we're going to explore each one of those models and really understand a little bit more about them and some of the challenges behind them and some of the great opportunities, which is really what I wanted to talk about. So the whole shift up, down, left, right, we've kind of covered it. Partly we're trying to say that, test in dev, test ops, it's just one shift to the left and right. We really want to be going much further than that. And we want to be looking at more acceptance around the business really being owning the actual the delivery and what they're trying to get out of it, and also the end users, which we've been doing for a long time. What I see, we all know about continuous integration, build and deployment, is that is really an enabler to give us that fast, rapid information to be able to provide to the actual to the business or to the end customer. So let's go into it. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is test platform as a service. I'm going to give you like a couple of seconds background about this, is because I know there's quite a few businesses that are looking, or consultancy services that are looking to provide this as a service. Now, I think the mistake, there's been a bit of a confusion in the fact that they've been talking about what I'd like to reference as test infrastructure as a service, which is providing you with the testing environment or whatever it may be, and not really a test platform. A platform where you can look at social enterprise collaboration. You can really look at leveraging testing services in an easily consumable form. So we're going to go through that first. And again, I'm going to reference some stuff that I was talking about this year around kind of the portfolio management side of things. And it was all about, actually delivering true value and providing the right level of business insight, the right information to the right people across maybe those 2,700 applications. The huge amount of complexity and stakeholder management that's involved in that. And equally, to be able to provide people with a platform, whether that be an individual, an organization, or a large enterprise, so that they can consume testing services, but also they can work and collaborate with other parts of the business to get that information. And I use the word data in, data out, the fact that, I don't like the idea that specialist knowledge is either encapsulated in maybe executable specifications or by test cases. I'd rather that information be in a format that is reusable across all the different testing phases, not just built into a test automation framework or something like that. So part of it is capturing those design patterns and those business rules and codifying them so that they can be reconsumable and also provide people with that platform. And also you've got that challenge with the whole multi-channel kind of customer experience. Businesses are now expecting a similar kind of experience, whether you're on mobile, you bring your own device, or you're on a platform like Windows 10. So that's the kind of social enterprise area. And I kind of say, well, how do you do that? How do you get it so that you can reuse the whole business assets kind of components? So I was lucky enough to talk to Hugh yesterday, or it could have been the day before, about this, and these guys, have been thinking about this for quite a long time, obviously, and they've kind of said, well, yeah, we can take that and we can actually track that from an end-to-end point of view. So you've got the actual requirements all the way through to stories, to tests. You'll be able to see the actual impact of a change to the business process model and how many more tests and the complexity around that, and reuse that from development, the whole testing dev point of view, all the way to use it for performance, simulating performance. I talked to Gartner this year about service virtualization. That's a really interesting area. We'll be going through that in test infrastructure as a service later on. But I think there's a great opportunity to give that visibility so that you can see the same requirement in every system. So making tools that aren't domain specific, that are cross domain. So that's a really interesting challenge. I think the way to be able to get information across and up into insight that people can do stuff with it is really important. And again, I'm going to, I don't really understand the whole complexity around this. And Julie questioned that last slide yesterday and said, Julie Gardner, and said, oh, well, actually, how do you do code coverage? And, that guys at Grid Tools have obviously sat there and worked out mathematical formulas to how you can actually calculate that. And, I think we've got to start applying a bit more, applied mathematics and applied physics to this, not to these models, not just kind of say, yeah, it's about 20% coverage because we've tested these 3 tests. We've got to quantify what a test is a little bit more and understand the impact of that, and whether that reusable asset is we're talking at performance level, we're looking at penetration, whatever it may be, we need to understand the impact of that and be able to provide the traceability to the business. So, business insight is obviously very, very powerful. So it's great the fact that we're talking about being able to create all these great new things, but partly what people might say, well, how do we get to talk to the business? How do we talk to the end customers? Well, actually, enterprise gamification has been around for a very long time. This is nothing new. This is kind of something that's been people have been using for a long time. Part of it is not only are you doing your requirements and you review them and you look at the patterns and everything else and the models, is part of it you start providing some feedback. It becomes a bit of fun. It becomes, this guy's done this amount of code with this least amount of errors, therefore he's got a badge saying he's an epic coder or a Jedi coder. Part of it is that we're starting to provide these platforms where actually we can provide insight and feedback which normally may not get up to that level, and we can collate that and do stuff with it. Let's take the whole gaming industry for a second. These metrics have been around for such a long time. The whole, the PS4 or the the Xbox One. I drove a new Mini recently, and it literally told me how I performed from an eco point of view. It was trying to make me become a better driver by making sure I changed gears, I didn't accelerate too hard, my CO2 emissions were low. And does that really add any value? Well, hopefully it'll make a bit of a difference. It says there I've saved 1.3 miles of petrol by driving like that. I think we've started to use these platforms to not only get better at what we do and have introduce that whole building a reputation, that moment of truth where you're saying actually these guys are delivering me real value, and also be able to quantify what that actually means. Now this is an old game which I saw a long time ago, which is called Game Dev Factory, and the whole point around it is that you can actually build a team up, and that team will be will have different strengths and weaknesses. They'll have good skills, and I look at this in a kind of an agile, jack of all trades, master of none area. Is that you get people who are better at design and technology, or bug fixing, or research, and the whole is you build those teams, you make better software, and you fix the bugs and stuff like that. Must be because I'm a tester that I found that enjoyable. But the whole point is that these games are actually giving us complex big data ratios, real-time stats to engage gamers. Why can't we use that same platform for testing? And incidentally, we can. Thankfully, I had a look yesterday at this blog post from the UTest guys. They've created a platform already that gives you that kind of star rating. And part of it is I do want to become a testing rock star. Part of it is you want to get better at what you do. You want to see how you're contributing, how you're making a difference in multiple projects. You want to be able to track that. That seems like, it might just seem like fluff to some people, but, part of it is giving you clearer understandings of, even being able to help plan with velocity, of putting teams together in that whole broken code model. And I've shown this slide a number of times over the years, but, the whole model now is the whole TripAdvisor kind of model, or I'm now calling it Test Advisor just because it's a bit of a joke. But the idea is you actually do give feedback on people. You do say they've done really well, or you do give them praise, but also you can look at how a resource has performed over time. It opens up that whole model, and I've talked a lot about this in the book. About the fact that this gives us an opportunity to put the people with the right skills, that broken comb kind of model where you've got the right mix of people as part of your Scrum team to deliver what you need to do based on the different technical challenging areas. This could be a link to a skills matrix or some kind of platform which you log how where people's strengths and weaknesses are. These are all bread and butter stuff. And how does that work? Well, the idea is you build teams, and I must admit, when I put this slide together, it was maybe slightly a bit of a joke. The whole solution command center, the idea of that is like a NASA command center that are dealing with all the deliveries coming in from different domains. So the whole testing, the development, the the deployment guys, and they're all regional hubs where literally they follow the sun, which my last role I did actually feel like we needed that, where we can hand off one testing activity to another time zone, and then all the levels underneath, making sure the environments are up, that people are managing all the risks and issues, the whole challenge around being able to scale up large amounts of resource or scale back down. These are whole challenges. This is a new challenge because we're dealing with 2,700 applications to automate, not 2 applications to automate. These are big portfolio level or even business level challenges. And equally, things have got more complex. The whole all-channel customer experience. We're going to, based on Gartner, we're going to be looking at robotics. We've got Google Glasses. We've got lots of different platforms where we're trying to provide the same information, the same kind of insight to whether or not you're using a mobile device or bring your own device, or you're working inside in the office, or you're out of the office. These are all new digital at the heart of the business challenges. This is a whole new platform we need to be thinking about to support this. So we've talked about platform. We talked about those, the way to interact with and collaborate. Now we're going to go into what people are already talking about, the whole test infrastructure as a service. I would like a test environment in the cloud, or I would like a test environment in the private cloud. How do I build it? Which is fine. These seem to be simple enough challenges, but there is still challenges around that. Part of it is, I don't really want to pay for a test environment when I'm not using it. So actually, I want to consume it. I want to be able to spin up large amounts of performance testing, and I want it to be a mix of hybrid or public, private, even community cloud. And equally, part of that is to discover all those. In the bottom right corner, there's an idea of just how many nodes might exist. And this represented a talk which I did around cloud maps, and be able to understand what your infrastructure looks like. In the case of that case, it was about 14,000 databases endpoints, which we had to discover across the business, which was that 4.3 petabytes of test data, which is humongous. So part of it is, building bridges now gives us this opportunity to actually connect in with public and private clouds, connect to public test environments in different geolocations and collect them together for a short period of time, and then destroy them when we need to. The idea is that we want to be able to integrate into the continuous build and delivery. We want to be able to spin it up when we need it and then blow it away. We don't want to have to pay for it all the time. We want to start maybe even having these kind of environments available as part of the community cloud, with great examples of different tools that you could potentially use, and services that you can consume, share recipes that are domain specific or testing specific, the whole, really helping to drive the community forwards. And then I've been talking about things like first day delivery, the whole TDD, BDD, ATDD. How do we get to the point where we can do performance testing from day one? And that was really where the Gartner conversation was around. And I'll go through that in a little bit of detail, but that was really to say about the switch from UI testing, which I've been talking about for the last 5 years, to really more API testing at message-based levels, dealing with service virtualization, network virtualization, to start being able to test these systems sooner, or even when they don't exist, from a conceptual point of view of this is what I would like, and test it for me before a single line of code has been written, which is, an interesting challenge. So I kind of coined this acronym because there's too many acronyms in the discussion paper, which is about 40 pages long. Part of it was, if you build it, they will test. Part of it is, if we've got the right test environment, we've got the best tools, the best technology, we've got the best people, they are going to do amazing things. And those used to be a difficult challenge. It used to be very hard to get the right people in the right time at the right place. It was all regional. You were having to deal with people, ring up. I talk about this morning in the sense of I got into the office at 7 a.m., rang up one of my partners, and they said, we're closed, we don't open until 9 a.m. Well, testing isn't regional anymore, it's global. I need to follow the whole 24 hours, follow the sun. Part of it is the challenges are now about, just-in-time testing, so to speak, and how we can consume those services. So if you build something, they'll come. Partly one of the things I've been working on quite recently is building hybrid public and private cloud solutions in there, and how you can snap those into particular clients. So, the whole challenge around, potentially doing performance testing or security testing. We've always had this kind of worry that, if you put information in the cloud, then, we're going to be breaking stuff. But if you've got we can very securely connect two private clouds together and do that performance testing and bridge those two networks, and deal with it in that way, then actually that solves a lot of the problem. Instead of saying it has to be in the cloud as far as public is concerned, we can't have it in. We all know that cloud is just data centers. It's just where they are is the big question. So part of one of the this typical implementation, which we've actually done for a client over in the States at the moment, we just literally said we'll procure you a lab which will be connected into your test environment. And it had a number of cores and memory and et cetera, and what that translated into was the capacity to be able to run stuff. So it came all with the necessary licenses. You paid for those licenses as you consumed them. You didn't pay up front for the massive investment of buying these tools, and it meant that you could have 15,000 load injectors. You could run 1,400 functional tests or a huge amount of API tests generating thousands of messages per second. Suddenly, instead of having to build all this environment and set it up and configure it, you can literally consume it on a daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, minutely, the whole flexibility. And I think that's the real power of cloud. And, part of that cloud thing, I also made a bit more of a joke about the whole cloud 2.0. But, part of that was, what would be the benefit of having a test environment in the cloud? Well, actually, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could have two clouds running at the same time, but maybe 30 seconds behind, emulating the same thing? And then when the system does crash, we can actually, like we can on our TiVo system, literally pause and rewind to the point just before that happens, and literally then start putting on heavy debugging information, take a snapshot of that Hyper-V configuration of 26 different servers, and then send it over to a developer, which would probably take 5 weeks if it was 3 or 4 terabytes, to then reopen that up and then debug it and find what the root cause is. These are great opportunities. Equally, Cloud 2.0, the idea behind that is we don't really care anymore. We don't care if it's Amazon Web Services or if it's Azure or if it's it's your own your own internal system, VMware system. We want to literally describe something. This is the recipe. If that, then this model. We want to describe a system and it would just generate it all. It would do all the DevOps kind of side things without really caring. It would just do it based on, what the best tools and technologies that moment of time are, what's the best cost model, et cetera, et cetera. So, exciting opportunities. Equally, the whole test first delivery model was saying, well, actually, we've waited too long to actually wait for the actual solution and the test to come into existence, even if that's in Sprint 1. Part of it is we want to actually be able to do all the testing from day one without having any of the infrastructure in place. We don't have the decision about whether or not which app server technology, which database server. We don't care if it's SQL, Oracle. We don't care if it's MongoDB. It doesn't matter to us. We know the kind of database messages we're going to be doing. We know the potential type of messaging, whether that be web services or REST or whatever it may be. We don't care about that. All we care about is being able to actually do the testing of the business logic against those target infrastructure before they decide what that is. So SV and NV really helps that. Service virtualization from a service point of view, and then NV for really the ability to kind of say, well, actually, it's not as simple as having a testing environment that's all on the same network. We really need to have 500 users that are in LA. We want to use the speed check information to see how their time to live, their packet losses, their experience based on the ecosystem they live in, and how many jumps that is to the data center, et cetera, et cetera. We want to be able to do all that and actually go to the business and say, yeah, what you're going to need is X, Y, Z. It's not going to scale. The solution's got challenges. We've tested it, and when these components actually come online, we can actually then turn off that stub and replace it with the actual service, and then rerun all our testing from day one. This would be an exciting vision if we could get to. So, for those people who know me, really my area has always been test automation. Test automation as a service, testing in the cloud is really where I've been talking about. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. Partly I've tried to make these slides as full of information which you can go and find out. I only found this document literally at the weekend, but here's a case study with test automation in the cloud and how you can do it. So go off and have a look at that. I've been talking about things like AMMI, the whole CMMI, starting to put a little bit more maturity around it. look at potentially reusable patterns. So Dorothy's obviously talked quite a lot about made a wiki where we can all collaborate on different patterns that work for test automation. I think we really should be doing that as a testing community anyway. And take the best bits and reuse classification trees, whatever it may be, that can add value and share those ideas and share those kind of new ways of doing testing technology. And part of the AMMI is to look at that maturity. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about today, you might be thinking, no, we can't do that, which is fine. But you may be at a different level or a different part of your digital journey in a year's time, 2 years' time. You may be looking at the moment about accelerating, really just getting something in there. You might be looking at being able to optimize that or sustain that over a large period of time. You'll be in a different change. There's no one solution to fit them all. It's continuously evolving, which is why I'm trying to put this whole stuff out here, is really to say these are ideas. You can take them to however you want to do. And I talked about this stuff. Again, the experiences in test automation. I talked about being able to do this from first day automation, being able to do all the automation before the application's been delivered. Go and have a look at that. If you've not read this book, fantastic book, definitely worth a read. Now, just to confuse people even more, test automation as a service, there's also functional testing as a service. This is a kind of I think they're pretty much the same thing. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to kind of look at them anyway as more of a continuous integration component of either test automation or the functional testing work that you're doing manually, or I use the word manumation, doing something through manually to then create automation assets out the back, which could be classed as test automated checking. But part of it is whatever you're doing, however you're working, whether or not you're a part of the business or you're a dev in test, or you're dealing with specialist performance testing, part of that is now that this testing is in the wild. We're all contributing to things. We're all using different tools, different ecosystems to be able to collaborate on. Thankfully, the example here is all using Team Foundation Service and Visual Studio, but the whole interaction now is part of that continuous build and delivery process. Part of it is you want to be able to interact, whether or not you're changing code or you are running scripts or doing performance, whatever it is, on any device at any time. It's the whole future of how we can do this. Again, I didn't want to go into too much detail, so I literally said, functional testing, I've talked about different tools, but thankfully I've just spent a large period of my time writing this book on recipes on how you can reuse code and share that code. So, that's another opportunity, is the whole, continuous integration, be able to run, whether it be automated or manual, whatever it may be, but run those assets, do the code coverage, do the test impact analysis, get all that value coming to different teams, reusing, stubs and shims with dev and test people, looking at how you get better at doing test ops or DevOps, all that is now part of that challenge of how you actually functionally deliver that. And obviously, performance testing as a service is no different. Performance testing as a service, again, is a consumable service. It should be part of your CI process. It should build the environment. If you don't have that environment, there's tools out there, free tools like potentially Visual Studio allows you a limited amount of free users in the cloud, which will actually spin up those environments, will inject load into your, let's say you're lucky enough to have a web front end in the cloud. There is tools there that can allow this. Even to the point of yesterday I was putting these slides together and literally, I signed up to StormRunner, pointed at a website, clicked the play button, started running performance tests against a website. I actually got to the point where I could create API calls to it, or I could use the true client, which again is all the concept of being able to reuse what you've done for functional testing for performance testing. All the message along here is reuse. It's all about quantifying it from a business point of view and understanding it, and then understanding how that relates and how we actually test that has been met. Mobile testing as a service, again, it's one of theen kind of challenges that is around at the moment. I've kind of kept out of mobile testing, but I'm now feeling like I've been dropped straight in at it. I've been lucky enough to work with people like Perfecto in the past, who've had some fantastic solutions, and Telerik, the tools which allow you to actually do mobile testing as part of the CI solution. A lot of the stuff that's out there now is actually telling you how to actually do continuous integration, but from a mobile point of view, in the cloud, and it doesn't really care, again, if you're using UFT or Visual Studio or using Selenium, it doesn't matter. All that stuff is just logistics. Part of it is we want to be able to consume a service. In this particular case, mobile testing as a service, we want to be able to do performance testing as a service. It's just a service now. So the same thing goes from a fact of using the mobile cloud. The whole great thing now is we can do high volume mobile automated testing. So the fact where we can do the same for functional as we can do for mobile and we can do for performance is we can scale up. We can scale up to hundreds of mobile devices in the cloud. And again, we're only using these when we need to, with thousands of different combinations of those 6.2 billion or whatever it was fact of the devices that are out there, and we can pick where our clients are and what their location is, even down to what road they live on. It's getting to that kind of level. It's craziness. But I'm actually going to might finish slightly on time here. But part of it is the final piece, again, something that I kind of kept a little bit away from, but security testing. Part of a review that I read in the World Quality Report was saying that, what are the best testing as a service potential areas, and they said security testing and performance testing. And I think, that's not anything new and no surprise to anyone, but, the whole complexity around doing security testing in the cloud, that is such a difficult area now. Are we going to have to worry about, what happens when there's huge amounts of people on Black Friday at different locations hitting different systems? There's definitely a new challenge there, and I think we've got to look at how we deal with things like systemic failure. The whole DR is not really DR anymore. Part of it is a service may fall down, but we want to continue. We still want to make credit card payments. We still want to be able to replicate all that, or if a back-end system dropping or lagging or performing badly or having a DOS attack against it where it literally goes out of the picture. So, part of it is we need to start thinking about security testing and how that actually will impact our business. So, lots of challenges, lots of opportunity. I think this is just a start, really, for us to take this forward. A bit like Paul's work, to really be able to drive how we want to be able to develop these models, as a service model that can wrap around. And I know these words, again, are very controversial. Unfortunately, my new job title had testing and quality and assurance all in it, so I kind of had to think to myself, okay, what do these mean? And I know quality, QA and testing, never shall the two meet, aren't the same thing. Assurance is definitely something else, but I could easily split them up and kind of say, well, what is the business wanting? Well, the business is actually wanting assurance. It wants to have that visibility to understand where it is, where it is from their target business on a page, what information they need, what innovation they need to be able to give them confidence in the actual what's being delivered. And part of these as a service models, at the core foundation is the idea is that we want to be able to give the business the flexibility to determine what the quality they want, but equally who owns the quality. And the whole, I've talked a bit about this in the discussion paper too, around the whole lean and Toyota, can anyone pull the stop code? Well, middle management definitely can, but not everyone can give that same funnel virtualization, that message all the way to the top to give them a real view of what is actually happening on the ground. Part of it is we all need to be responsible for quality, and testing, ambassadors of data. We are there to give people information and quick feedback, or add value in our own special way. So business testing really is looking at how we integrate as an activity into the whole solution lifecycle, whole solution delivery lifecycle model, and how we break down those silos. We share assets, we share stubs, we share reusable descriptions of stuff that other teams can utilize and leverage. At the same time, we understand those business models, and we're able to be able to add value on verification, to be able to test those models and make sure they work. So, that's pretty much it. I've managed to finish 5 minutes earlier, so there's just 2 more slides here. But part of it is I'm realizing these challenges are a much bigger challenge than I thought before. And finally, I added some slides in, some fireworks, because it is November the 5th, and Neil did ask for those specifically. So that's now leads us on to the testing as a service model discussion over at Test Huddle. I hope you guys have stayed awake for that and also enjoyed that. I really look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. So I'll pass you back over to you, speaker.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Jonathan. I'm just going to open my slides here again. And before we head across the Test Huddle, I just want to tell you about next week's webinar with Keith Klein, the CEO of Doran Jones, and he will be presenting breaking the poverty cycle with software testing. And now we're going to head across to Test Huddle. Let me just share with you again the link that you'll need just to find the forum. And in the chat box now you'll see that link. But alternatively, if you go to Test Huddle and click on the slider that's there, it'll bring you right into the discussion. Thanks again, Jonathan, and thank you all for attending. The webinar is now over. Take care.